If you're lucky enough to own one of those homes, definitely reach out to the city to learn more about those opportunities.
It's great that they're promoting heritage conservation. Now, one thing I've heard about is pre-approved plans for laneway homes.
Yes,
Does Burnaby offer that?
they're working on it. The city's developing a pre-approved plan program, which will give you a bunch of building plans that already meet all the BC Building Code and Burnaby's regulations.
So shortcut.
Exactly. It can streamline the process and save you some money on those design fees. But even with pre-approved plans, you'll still need to go through a site-specific compliance review as part of the building permit process.
Gotcha. So it sounds like we've covered a ton when it comes to building a laneway home in Burnaby, all those rules, regulations, and processes.
Yes.
But I'm sure our listeners itching to get started and probably wondering, who can I trust to build this thing?
That's a great question. And speaking of trust, we have a builder recommendation we think would be perfect.
Okay? Drum roll, please.
If you're looking to create a laneway home, either for family or as an investment, we highly recommend Corval Homes.
Okay.
They've got a stellar reputation for building high-quality homes in Burnaby. Their website is corvalhomes.com. It's got a ton of information about their services.
I'm intrigued. What makes them stand out? Why Corval Homes specifically?
Well, first of all, they're really committed to sustainable building practices, which, aligns with Burnaby's approach to these laneway homes.
Big plus. What else?
They have a great eye for design, really creating those private spaces that we talked about. They understand that balance between functionality, aesthetics, and respect for the environment.
So they can help you create a home that not only meets your needs, but also blends into the neighborhood.
Yes, and they also have tons of experience navigating Burnaby's permitting process. That can be a real lifesaver for someone who's new to this.
That's invaluable. Knowing all those ins and outs can save a lot of headaches.
Absolutely. And here's a pro tip. When you reach out to them, ask for Gordy. He's their laneway home guru, and he comes highly recommended.
Excellent advice. So we've covered a lot of the essentials, the regulations, the considerations, and even found a top-notch builder.
Yes.
But we're just getting started. Stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive, where we'll explore some design possibilities and help you envision a laneway home that truly meets your needs.
Sounds good. Welcome back to the deep dive.
We're picking up right where we left off, exploring laneway homes in Burnaby.
We laid out all the groundwork, the zoning, ownership, all those nuts and bolts. Now it's time to get creative.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Oh,
It's like we're putting on our architect hats and getting ready to sketch out dream floor plans.
exactly. And remember those design recommendations we talked about? Those aren't just about keeping the peace with the neighbors.
Right.
They can really help you make the space more enjoyable and functional.
Yeah, like orienting the windows towards the lane for more privacy, using that translucent glazing for any windows facing the neighbor.
Right, exactly. And don't forget about landscaping. Trees and shrubs can really make a difference, creating privacy screens, softening those hard edges, and adding some natural beauty.
Yeah, it's like your own little green buffer zone. And those living walls, we talked about a whole wall covered in greenery. It looks amazing. And it helps with insulation and noise reduction, too.
Speaking of insulation and noise reduction, remember Burnaby's focus on energy efficiency. Meeting those step code levels doesn't just get you a height bonus. It can really save you money on energy costs over the life of the home.
So you're saving money A&D, reducing your environmental impact. Win-win.
Now, when it comes to designing the layout, it really depends on how you're going to use it. Family, rental income, or maybe a little bit of both.
That's a good point. The design should reflect how it's going to be used. If it's for family, you might want to prioritize a bigger living area for gatherings, extra bedrooms, maybe a home office.
Absolutely. And if it's mainly an investment property, you want to create a space that's attractive to renters.
Okay, what features would make renters swoon?
Well, a modern kitchen with energy-efficient appliances is always a good one.
Sure.
In-suite laundry is a big plus.
Uh-huh.
And, of course, everyone loves some private outdoor space.
Yeah, those are all great selling points. And don't forget about parking. We talked about that one dedicated spot, but having additional parking can be a big draw for renters.
Right, because let's face it, parking can be tough in Burnaby. Now let's talk about something important if you're building for family accessibility.
Accessibility.
The guide encourages homeowners to think about making their laneway homes accessible for people with mobility challenges. It's about making sure everyone feels welcome.
That's great. What are some ways to make it more accessible?
Well, you could choose a single-story design so there are no stairs at all.
Okay.
At grade, no step entrances. And they even recommend exploring universal design principles.
Universal design.
Yeah, it's about creating spaces that can be used by people of all ages and abilities, Wider doorways, lever-style door handles, bathrooms that are easy to move around in.
So making the space adaptable to different needs.
Yes. And a universally designed home is also more marketable if you decide to rent it out or sell it later. It's a good investment.
We've covered accessibility, but what about safety? Are there any specific safety considerations?
Well, they talk about that pathway, the one that connects the street to the laneway home.
Right.
That's really important for fire access and pedestrian access. Make sure emergency responders can reach the house, and it provides a safe route for residents.
Right, so it's not just about convenience, it's about safety too.
Exactly. Now, the guide doesn't go into specific features beyond that pathway, but it's always smart to be proactive about safety. Smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, a well-lit pathway, all essential.
You could even add a security system for peace of mind.
Absolutely. So we've covered design, accessibility, safety. I know there's one question that's probably on everyone's mind. How much is all this going to cost?
That's the million-dollar question, literally.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's no simple answer.
No.
The cost can vary a lot depending on all sorts of things.
Yeah, there are a lot of moving pieces. Let's break it down. What are some of the things that affect the price?
Well, size. A bigger laneway home is going to need more materials and more labor,
Of course.
and that drives up the cost.
Exactly. More square footage equals more money. And then the level of finishes you choose, are you going high-end appliances, fancy fixtures, or are you going more budget-friendly?
Right, it's about balancing your wish list with your budget.
Absolutely. And then there's also the site conditions. Challenging soil or a lot of excavation can add to the expense.
So it's not just what you see above ground, it's what's going on below the surface as well.
Exactly. And then there are permits and fees, which can change depending on how complicated your project is. You want to include those in your budget right from the start.
Okay, so we've got size, finishes, site conditions, permits. This is starting to feel overwhelming.
I know, right? But there are ways to get a better estimate.
Okay, that's reassuring. What resources can help?
Well, a good builder like Corval Homes, they can give you a detailed cost breakdown. They'll take into account your specific needs and the unique characteristics of your property.
So don't just try to guess based on what you see on HGTV.
Exactly. A good builder can help you make a realistic budget and avoid any surprises down the road. Now, let's say you've got your budget figured out, found a builder you trust. Are you ready to start digging?
Hold on. Before we break ground, there's one super important step. Talking to the neighbors.
Oh, that's so important. We talked about it a bit before, but it's really worth repeating. You have to be upfront with your neighbors and considerate of everyone around you.
So no sneaking around and hoping they won't notice.
Definitely not. Talk to them early on before things get too far along. Let them know about your plans. Give them some basic info about the size and the design of the laneway home. Be ready to answer their questions.
That makes sense. Building good relationships right from the beginning. But what if they have concerns? What are some things neighbors might worry about with a laneway home?
Well, privacy is often a big one. They might be worried about windows overlooking their property or less sunlight in their backyard. Parking and traffic are other big ones. People worry about more congestion or not being able to find a place to park.
Those are all valid concerns. How could you address those and put their minds at ease?
You want to show them that you've thought about their perspective. Explain how you're using design elements to minimize privacy issues, things like window placement and landscaping.
So it's not just telling them, it's showing them that you've thought it through.
Exactly, and be willing to work with them to find solutions. Maybe you can adjust a window or add some extra landscaping. It's about finding a balance between your needs and theirs.
So it's a collaborative process.
Absolutely. You never know. They might even have some ideas you hadn't thought of.
That's the beauty of communication.
Right. Now, even if everyone's on board at first, it's really important to keep talking to your neighbors throughout the process.
Yeah.
Keep them informed about the timeline and any potential disruptions. It's about being considerate.
Little gestures make a big difference. We've talked about design, accessibility, safety, budgeting, and those all-important conversations with the neighbors.
Right.
Are there any other key things about the building process that we should be talking about?
Well, choosing the right builder is essential.
We already talked about Corval Homes, but what are some qualities to look for in any builder?
Experience is key. You want someone with a good track record of building laneway homes in Burnaby. Ask for references, look at their past projects.
Do your homework.
Exactly. Communication is also super important. You want a builder who will answer your questions and keep you in the loop. And attention to detail. You want someone who's meticulous about the whole process.
Yeah, it's not just slapping things together.
Right. They should be invested in creating a beautiful, well-built home. And finally, make sure they really understand Burnaby's regulations. It's like finding a partner for this adventure.
Someone who can guide you through the whole thing.
Yes. And speaking of exciting adventures, stay tuned for part 3 of our deep dive, where we'll talk about the surprising benefits and challenges of actually living in a Laneway home.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
We're wrapping up our Laneway home adventure here in Burnaby.
We've gone through pretty much everything from regulations and design.
Yeah, to budgeting, talking to the neighbors.
But now I think it's time to zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture. What does all of this mean for Burnaby?
Right. Well, one of the biggest benefits is that Laneway homes increase housing density without drastically changing how neighborhoods look and feel.
Right, you're not putting up these massive high-rises.
Exactly. It's a much more subtle way to add more housing.
So you're adding housing while still preserving that neighborhood feel.
Exactly. And this increased density can actually help with affordability.
Okay.
When there are more housing options, it can help keep rents and home prices from going up too much.
It's like a little bit of relief for the housing market.
Yes. And on top of that, Laneway homes can be a source of income for homeowners. They can rent them out.
Yeah, we talked about how you can't sell them separately, but renting them out is a good option.
Right. And for families, it can provide much needed space so they don't have to move to a bigger, more expensive house.
So it seems like a good thing for both homeowners and renters.
Yeah, it is in a lot of ways. But of course, there are also some potential challenges.
Okay, let's talk about that. What are some of the things people should consider before jumping on the Laneway home bandwagon?
Well, like any construction project, there can be unexpected costs and delays. Even if you're careful with your budget, things happen.
Yeah, expect the unexpected, right?
Exactly. And then there's privacy. We touched on this a bit. But even with good design, you're going to be living close to your neighbors.
You might not have as much privacy as you would in a detached home.
Right. That's why talking to your neighbors is so important.
Set those boundaries early.
Exactly. And parking and traffic can also be issues.
Yeah.
More people living in an area can put a strain on parking, and there might be more traffic.
Especially in areas that are already congested.
Yes, exactly. Even though Laneway homes are required to have that one dedicated parking spot, it doesn't always solve the problem completely.
So it's about being mindful of the impact on the whole neighborhood.
Right. Encouraging things like biking and walking can help.
Okay. So costs, privacy, parking, anything else?
Well, depending on where you put the Laneway home and how high it is, it could create some shadows for your neighbors.
Yeah, that's something to think about.
It is. And a good designer can use 3D modeling to see how the shadows will fall.
That's pretty cool.
It is. And one last thing, it's important to remember that Laneway homes aren't a solution to every housing problem. They work well in some situations, but not everywhere.
So it's not a magic wand.
No, it's not. It takes planning and collaboration.
So as we wrap up our Laneway home deep dive, what are the key takeaways for our listeners?
Do your research. Understand the rules. Explore your options.
Okay.
Make sure it all makes sense for you financially.
Right. Get prepared.
Yes. And don't forget to talk to your neighbors. It really can make the whole process so much smoother.
It's all about working together.
It is. And building a Laneway home can be challenging, but it can also be incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, it's a chance to create more space for your family or generate some extra income. And you're contributing to a more sustainable community.
It's a win-win.
So we've given you the information, the pros, the cons, the possibilities.
Yeah.
Now it's time for you to take the next step.
Imagine creating that perfect backyard retreat.
A little haven for your family or a great investment opportunity.
And don't forget, if you decide to go for it, Corvell Homes is there to help you. And make sure to ask for Gordy.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Laneway homes in Burnaby.
We hope you learned a lot.
And maybe even got inspired.
Happy building!